Just as I had posted my retrospective on Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, the biggest announcement about the franchise that you could ever even imagine happened. And I won't lie, waking up to all the quality memes of the Avatar returning was the best thing to happen in a long while. So today, in the spirit of more Avatar, let's talk about what I would like to see from the new studio, as well as what I think we will actually see. Without further ado, let's go. Firstly, I want to talk about the things that I think we will actually see from the studio. We know for a fact that the first installment they're working on is a theatrical film, which actually allows for a surprising amount of different stories to be told. A lot of people are expecting to see a continuation of Aang's story, but I really don't think we'll see them go that route. I feel like it's been made pretty clear that Aang's story has been told, and even though it is being continued in the comics, there are no real plans of revisiting the main gang. Unless... there is one aspect that I wouldn't be too surprised if we see explored: Zuko's mother. The second installment of the comic book series explains what happened to her, and since it is just a single graphic novel, I feel like a movie might be the perfect amount of time to expand on it a little and make it a very nice one-shot to tie up that loose end. I won't get into any specifics on what actually happens in the comic, but I really do feel like it is a story that is worth telling. It does also expand on what happened to Azula after the end of the war, something that we really have little information on. The last time we see her is when she's defeated by Zuko and Katara. The only problem is that adapting stories comes with a couple of issues. The graphic novels are considered as canon, but if the movie were to change things, is that now the canon? Also, there are plenty of people who have already read the graphic novels, so would they be interested in watching a quite short story told in a movie format again? Especially with the graphic novel already being visual in and of itself. These are all questions worth talking about, which I will leave to smarter people than me, but if it was my decision, I'd be more than fine seeing the story adapted for the big screen. Moving on to the next theory I've seen float around is a one-shot about the origin of the White Lotus or the Red Lotus. Yes please to both. Starting with the White Lotus, we of course know that this is a secret society consisting of master benders and wise fighters. And while we got hints of how this organization was formed, we really aren't too sure about the details. We only see that during Korra's lifetime it has already lost its secrecy completely, and has a pretty open and clear mission statement. But I think going into the past and seeing the formation of it would be really fascinating. Just how far back does it go? We know that Iroh was a high-up member, but there would have to be more of them, right? Were they already established when Roku and Kyoshi were around? All of these things are very much worth exploring in my opinion, as we really don't have anything to go off of. Related to this, the formation of the Red Lotus. We know that Zahir and the rest of the Red Lotus were former members of the White Lotus, but that's pretty much all we know. During some of the fights in Korra, we hear characters say that they put them behind bars once, and that they'll do it again, and so on. But that's all we have. So I think a complete backstory on why they decided to rebel and go against the White Lotus would be really fascinating. I think the most interesting part is that the Avatar wouldn't be around for this. But you know who would be? Sokka. Yes, the character who for some reason was completely ignored in The Legend of Korra. Let's get Jack Decina back and see some more of that chaotic Sokka energy now that he's older. Another idea that has been floated around is a movie about Korra and what happened to her after the events of the series. But again, the graphic novels pick up exactly where the show left off, and there are already new installments confirmed to be in the works. So retreading this does feel a little redundant. Of course, you knew I was going to mention a standalone Uncle Iroh spin-off, because of course I will. I know I already mentioned the White Lotus and everything about that, but seeing Iroh's adventures in the spirit world, his mastery of fire through training with various other bending masters of different nations, and even his story after he left the war and became a much more peaceful person would all be awesome to see. And let's be honest, everyone loves Iroh, so it would also function as a very successful pull to get people pumped for more content to come from the studio. Next up, one single question. Where is Suki. This has become the next Zuko's mother question in the community. She is never mentioned once in The Legend of Korra. She does appear in the graphic novels following the events of the series, but we know nothing past that. The only thing with this is that we got an announcement for a standalone Suki comic coming summer of 2021, so this may be another case of retreading already told stories. Alright, I left my most confident guess for last, something that I think we will for sure see. Either a movie about Kyoshi or a full-fledged series. I'm not too sure which route they want to go, as I think the Kyoshi novels could be adapted for a single film. But if you think about the cycle of the avatars, air, water, earth, and fire, things become a little more complicated. We got air with Aang and water with Korra, so Kyoshi makes perfect sense, even though it's obviously not actually in historical chronological order. If you've read the novels, you'll know that Kyoshi's story is pretty dark, so it would also continue the trend of the series becoming more and more mature with each installment, with Korra's stories already being quite a bit more twisted than the last Airbenders. Retrospective video about that in the card. But thinking more about it, personally, I think a full-fledged series is actually much more likely, as I felt that her story was extremely expansive, and fitting into a single movie might be a little bit problematic. Now moving on to the things that I just want to see. I'll actually start with something that I don't want to see, and I know this is pretty controversial, but I don't really want to see an Avatar even further into the future. Obviously there could be plenty of interesting stories to tell, with bending no longer being such a powerful force as it was, but for me, the traditional and martial arts aspect of bending is what defines the world of Avatar. I already feel like a part of this was lost in The Legend of Korra, but I think if we move even further, bending might just be a convenience rather than an actual weapon. But I guess they could still surprise me. You know, maybe there's a story about an Avatar coming to terms that technology is here to stay, and we see them develop their abilities even further, now not only maintaining balance in the world, but also the balance between tradition and progress. This could even be expanded to their bending, with them constantly switching between the elements and tech. That actually sounds pretty good. But again, things for smarter people than me to think about. Now, for what I want to see. Honestly, all the things that I mentioned previously are something that I would absolutely love, whether it's a series about Kyoshi or the White Lotus or anything at all. Just give them to me as soon as possible. But there are still a few, a little more out there ideas I'd be interested in. I'll get the craziest one out of the way first, a villain avatar. I'm not even sure this is possible, as Rava is literally the spirit of light, but I think a story where the Avatar can no longer ensure the balance of the world by trying to peacekeep and actually has to go on the offensive would be interesting. For instance, if an all-out war between the nations starts, and the Avatar has to put an end to it in a not-so-peaceful way. Perhaps his group works almost as the Red Lotus, where they go around dismantling the established powers, thereby taking them out of the war. This Avatar may have to develop his abilities even more than any of the others, so we may see him manifest spirit forms like Aang does a few times in the show, to deliver massive blows to the battlefield. Maybe there could also be a war between the nations wanting to get the power of the Avatar on their side. Because of this, the Avatar would end up rebelling and going against the nations completely. Okay, I know this is crazy and will never happen, but it's an interesting thought experiment, okay? Now, onto much more realistic ideas. Despite what I said at the top of the video with the story seemingly being over for Aang, I'd absolutely love to see them as adults. We got glimpses of this in the Legend of Korra flashbacks, but not too much. Again, we'd get to see Sokka, which is already something worth creating a series over, right? This would also fix the issue of overlapping with the graphic novels, as they're still dealing with things right after the main show, instead of skipping forward to our characters already being adults. We'd also get to see Aang as an even more powerful bender, as, if you recall, he learned the 4 elements in just a few months, and was already capable of some insane bending feats. So imagine what he'd be like all these years later. There are so many different stories to tell here, it's nuts. The world adapting to this new way of living after generations of war, the establishing of Republic City, the expansion of the White Lotus, Yukon, Toph establishing the police force, and so many more. Next up, I want to go back before the events of the original series, and see another completely unknown avatar. Probably an Earthbender, as we talked about with Kyoshi. Like I mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of going further in technological advancement, so this idea probably isn't too surprising. One note here, I would like this avatar to go through mastering the elements again, mainly just to see how training for the avatar happens before the established White Lotus approach and Aang's rush training process. With this sort of story, we'd also get to see exactly how training with the air nomads actually happened. We'd get to see the Fire Nation dragons and a bunch of other things that we've only gotten glimpses of in the series so far. Being an earthbending avatar, we can also of course expect their personality to be much different to Korra's or Aang's. Next up, similar to the previous idea, I'd absolutely love to see the idea of Wan being the first avatar expanded on further. We saw how he spent his entire life trying to keep balance in the world, when most people had no idea why he is capable of bending all the elements and what this avatar business is even about. I think it would be cool to see the idea of the avatar being established in the first place. There are so many possibilities to explore with it being so foreign during those early times. Some people may attempt to somehow steal his abilities, the politics of how much sway the avatar has over the four nations, and so on. Also, the very next avatar after Wan would have no idea that they have these abilities, and would essentially have to relearn everything from scratch, until maybe they would accidentally enter the avatar state and come into contact with Wan. Also imagine after the initial cycle of the four avatars ended, would people expect for it to begin anew? This whole concept just seems extremely cool to me and is something I'd pay good money to see. And that's pretty much it. I expect that we'll hear some more info on this pretty soon, but I wouldn't expect any of these projects to come out any sooner than spring or even summer of 2022. I actually have a few takeaways in a broader sense from this whole announcement. Firstly, the live-action Netflix series now has to be stellar for anybody to care about it. Once it was announced, it was the only bit of Avatar television we had had in years. Then the original creators left due to creative differences, and people were a little worried that we don't get another disappointment. So we don't get our first disappointment. But now that we know for sure that it is not the only project in the works, but that the franchise will get expanded even more with the original creators and in animated format, thus avoiding all the casting problems, aging the characters up so they don't change too much between seasons and blah blah blah, there really is nothing to worry about with the Netflix series. If it's good, great, more Avatar content, right? If it turns out horrible, who cares? We've got more quality content on the way. And secondly, I think it's important to realize that these companies are finally understanding the power of the franchises they hold. In the modern era of revivals, remasters, and everything else of that nature, it's baffling that we have had to wait so long for the juggernaut that is the Avatar franchise to be continued. What happened during last summer with the series being put onto Netflix really speaks for itself. This series really is something special, and will no doubt cause a ripple effect throughout the industry to think about other, actually faithful revivals that don't butcher the series like some recent reboots. We could maybe see shows like, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Dexter's Laboratory, Johnny Bravo. No, that'd be crazy, right? And that's the video. This whole Avatar Studios deal has had me buzzing ever since the announcement, and I'll no doubt be kicking myself for thinking of another potential show idea while uploading this. As I mentioned though, don't get too hyped up just yet. We're still likely quite a long ways off from the projects actually coming out. But that does mean we have plenty of time to discuss what we want to see, so be sure to drop those down in the comments. I'd love to hear why you hated my villain avatar idea and why it's stupid, as well as any other theories you might have. As usual, all the social media links are below. As I've said for the past few videos, I'd recommend you follow the Twitter to stay up to date with upcoming content, as my schedule is still very much all over the place. But other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.